Good evening to all of you, and good morning to Peter. Um, it's 7 o'clock here, and it's early morning in the US. We'll just wait for 5 more minutes. Some other participants are just about to join, and then we'll begin. Good evening, Emin, sir. Uh, nice to see you, sir. Emin Reddy, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Atul Singh ji, Atul Shah ji, thank you for joining. Good evening.
Good evening, Vinay.
Satya.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can hear you, sir.
Good evening. All the
Good to
best.
see you,
All the
sir.
best to all of you. All the best,
Thank
Neha.
you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Angela is
Hi,
also
hi.
joined from US. Welcome. Satya is there. Sudha, Visha. Visha has come. She's fine now.
She's
Visha
getting better.
was not keeping well, or Priya was not keeping well. Who was not keeping well?
Gracia.
Visha. Okay.
Gracia's just recovered.
Yeah. Hi, Mamta. You have also joined today. Welcome. Abba, ma'am, welcome.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, everybody. Nice to be back here to the bonfire.
Yeah. Yeah, sir. Sutaba ma'am had asked for the bonfire today, but she's not there. So I'll have to remind her. Chandrika Nehmi. Good evening, Mamta.
Good evening, Vineet, and good evening, everyone.
Good evening to everyone. Good evening, Aruna ma'am. Mamta
Good
here.
evening, ma'am.
Good evening. Good
Yeah,
evening.
good evening.
Good evening,
Aruna
Vineet,
ma'am
and
is joined.
good evening.
Good evening, ma'am. Yeah.
Good evening.
Welcome. It's 5 minutes now, we'll begin now. Uh, Most welcome to all our participants for today. Today is the last uh, virtual roundtable in the Jiva series, hosted by PARIMAL, the Pracademic Lab of MP Police DG Research and Policy Cell. I welcome all our esteemed participants in this roundtable. We are very happy to have you all with us today. The additional special DG training Aruna Rao ma'am is with us. She's presiding over today's roundtable. Today, the main speakers are Neha Sinha from IDFT Institute and Professor Peter Oakes from University of Virginia. Also, we had to have Professor Akshay Mangla joining us from University of Oxford, but some last minute issues came up and he is not able to join today. I welcome both our panelists for the day. And the theme is state capacity and the rights at the interface of security, justice, and the community. Within this theme, we had invited Neha Sinha, who is the senior fellow at the IDFC Institute and a very important partner with the DG Research and Policy Cell. She has been instrumental in many action-based research related to governance. With some of her concentration has been on law enforcement and policing, and we are very happy to have her with us today. Professor Peter Oakes is a very senior professor at the University of Virginia. I had the occasion to be under his guidance in the University of Virginia last year when I was visiting faculty there. Professor Oakes specializes in religious studies and various aspects of religious studies. He has a number of books to his credit, a number of theoretical work done on various aspects of religion and politics and democracy, with specialization in Jewish studies and also in religion, politics, and different aspects of democratic governance within that field. I welcome you, sir, on this forum, and thanks for taking out time so early in the morning for us. I'm very honored to have most of our esteemed guests with us. I would like to inform our participants today that we have a galaxy of very senior professionals and researchers and policy professionals with us who have contributed to different aspects of governance, justice, human rights, policing, development, and related fields. I welcome you all. Before I ask our panelists to start the discussion, I would open up the theme for today. The theme for today is state capacity and rights at the interface of security, justice, and the community. The state capacity needs to be understood from the context of participative governance, from the context of community policing, from the context of community at the interface of security and justice. 2020 would be remembered not only for COVID-19 pandemic, but also for Black Lives Matter movement, which took global prominence and question some of the norms of law enforcement and policing. Within that context, one needs to redefine what is the role of community and its intersectionality with security and justice, and with that in mind, how the state and its capacity to understand the interface of security and justice with the centrality of community must be refigured, redesigned, and reimagined within the context of what we know of law enforcement and justice institution, and what we must know of law enforcement and justice institutions within the context of security, justice, and human rights. With that theme in mind, there has been a lot of work done in this context, some policy analysis done in this context, and both our speakers today have had a background in understanding these things and working on these things. Also, most of our participants have been uh, engaged in one way or the other in reimagining, redesigning, and reconfiguring these concepts through their work or through their writings. So we are very happy to have this forum open for discussion today. First, I'll invite Neha Sinha from IDFC Institute to kindly take over this theme, and within the context of the work of IDFC Institute and also her own work on this theme, I would request her to share her experience. Madam Sinha, please.
Thank you, Vineet. Am I well audible? Great, thanks. Before, I've actually prepared a small set of slide deck for the presentation today. But before that, hello to everyone for joining today, and a big thank you to the Madhya Pradesh Police Academy team, especially Special DG Aruna Mohan Rao, ADG Anuradha Shankar, Vineet Kapoor, and many others in the team for hosting this fantastic series of talks. I have learned a lot through the week. The multidimensional and multisectoral approach to the problem has really enriched my understanding of the problem in many ways. IDFC Institute has been engaging with Madhya Pradesh Police for a couple of years now, and it's been great learning. But I like to particularly mention that the enthusiasm and the positive approach of the team has been extremely encouraging for us, not just for me, but for the entire team at large at the Institute. And it's a privilege to engage with all of you. On that front, I'll just like to screen share. Is it enabled? Can I go ahead and screen share?
It's
I'll
enabled.
just try.
Yeah. बड़े-बड़े लोग हैं, बड़े-बड़े
Is everyone able to see?
Yes,
Yes, ma'am, perfectly.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So, as Vineet mentioned, and he talked about many dimensions of state capacity and rights at interface of security, justice, and community. I will actually concentrate on the work that we have been doing as a team independently, one independent work, and a couple of work that we have done with Madhya Pradesh, which kind of highlights this aspect in several ways. So at the center of state capacity and rights at interface of security, justice, and community actually lies rule of law, and the fact that rule of law is the purest form of public good. It is the core responsibility of the state to perform to its citizens. It's a most important ingredient for good quality of life, ease of doing business, inclusive market, ensuring access to justice to all. It enables equal workforce participation, reduces vulnerability, and facilitates urbanization and livelihood. And these all big, huge words are actually really important in reducing vulnerability, in increasing inclusivity in the society. But what is the mechanism to actually achieve this? And the mechanism is prevention. Prevention of crime is the enabler for rule of law, and adequate institutional capacity, particularly within the state police and citizen-centric approach are really key to achieving this. So when we talk about security, justice, and community, we actually look at it more like a continuum. Prevention is the start for this. Access to police services through FIRs, through police response, through crime investigation, the quality as well as the rapidness of it is really important in determining security. The second part of the problem statement that we are discussing today, justice, it kind of involves, in broad terms, prosecution, delivery of justice, correctional services. This is the second part. And the core of it is actually community policing, which is the third part of the problem statement being discussed today. Community policing, in many ways, is actually the start and the end of it all. It's really important for the state to actually embed within the community to understand the issues and to also kind of work for the people and become by the people. It's really important to actually be very service oriented, move away from a queue centric to a more community and victim centric police over time. This is something that we have discussed over the last 4 days, and I'll again like to talk about it in different ways. But in the whole phases of access to justice, police is actually one of the most important component. And despite that, it's underinvested, it's under-researched, it's not well understood. It's supposed to be one of the most opaque organization from the outside. People worry about approaching the police in many ways. And also, there is very little understanding, very little analytical information about the police in the public space. So we at IDFC Institute, about 5 years back, started working in this space of rule of law. And the first piece that we started to understand about and try to really dig into was to understand the vulnerability of the households. Uh, the the vulnerability of the households. And for this purpose, we actually did a household survey across 20,000 plus households in metros, Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, and Chennai. And we asked people about their experiences with crime, whether they went to the police, what their experience was when they went to the police, what their expectation from the police is, what is their view about safety, what are the behavioral changes that they are making to be able to keep themselves safe. And we kind of gauged a lot of vulnerability in the society, and this was common vulnerability. It was not the typical kind that we read about. So in Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, and Bangalore, when we surveyed the households and asked them how serious the problem of crime was in their area, we found that in Delhi, about 51% people felt that crime was a serious problem. And that kind of shows about the seriousness of the problem, how vulnerable these population is, how insecure they feel. The numbers were lower in the other cities, but actually it does show in many ways that we have to actually go to the population and kind of understand what the problem is, particularly because the state of law and order is understood through a very narrow set of official data, which is only about reported crime, which is only about the FIRs. We hardly understand what safety is. We hardly understand what vulnerability people face in general. So when people are insecure, what do? They start getting worried. When they are worried, they have various ways of adaptive behaviors to as to keep themselves safe. Some of the questions that we asked on the safety perception side were, two of them are actually depicted here. When do you start worrying about safety of your female member being outside home unaccompanied? And we found a variety of answers across the city, but we saw that mostly in Delhi, people are worried after 9 p.m. Most are worried after 11 p.m. In case of men, the same questions when we asked, we found that most people were okay till about 9 p.m., but by 11 p.m., almost the entire population is worried. And we had a huge sample size, so we were able to make population level estimations. The bar graph on the side shows where the percentage of people who actually felt quite safe. So only about 1% of people in Delhi felt that they were safe. That is a very small percentage of population, which means that the others actually were feeling unsafe at some point or the other. And so this vulnerability actually perpetuates, and people start internalizing different ways of keeping themselves safe. They avoid walking alone. They keep away personal stuff, expensive stuff. They avoid walking at certain times of the day. In dire situation, people really withdraw from the workforce. They, in case of women, it's even more difficult. In case of children, it's a much starker vulnerability situation. So apart from understanding what vulnerability is, we also try to assess what access to justice looks like. We actually asked people whether they were able to register the crime. In case of theft, which was one of the 7 crimes where we had a good sample to be able to make population level estimations, we found that only 6 to 8% of theft was being actually registered. If you look at these concentric circles across the 4 cities, the yellow circle depicts the population which was a victim of theft. The white circle depicts a population which approached the police, and the purple one actually depicts just the ones who were able to register. So it's really small percentage of the population which is actually able to access the police services. And it does show about the poor availability of access. When we asked these people who were able to register about their satisfaction and dissatisfaction level, we found that across Delhi and Mumbai, the numbers were around 50%. In Chennai and Bangalore, the number were around 82 and 70%. And most of the reasons behind these satisfaction levels were completely oriented towards soft skills. Now, these were something like the police personnel was polite, they were prompt, they were accurate. The ones who were dissatisfied, they were dissatisfied because the personnel did not listen to them, they were rude, they pinned the blame on the victim, they were dissuading the victim to actually register the crime. So these are kind of things which actually dissuades access to justice. It really impedes the security aspect of it. After this independent study, we kind of understood that this is not end all, and we have to engage with police. And police being a state subject, it's really important to engage with state police department. And at the State Police Academy, we at the Madhya Pradesh State Police Academy, actually, we have been working very closely with Vineet, with Anuradha, Shankar, and everyone else. I, in fact, remember the first conversation that we had with the police leadership in Madhya Pradesh, and that was a very interesting one where the question was, how can we make the whole organization function like a team? How can we make the organization function like they are one organization towards one target of serving the people, rather than different parts of the organization? It's a huge organization of thousands of people. So how do we even do something like this? Since then, we have been working with the police in different ways. We have been trying to understand organizational behavior. We have been trying to understand enablers, and we have kind of common thread across the work has been police training and motivation. Back in 2019, we surveyed 2 cohorts of deputy superintendents of police. This study was done in partnership, of course, with Madhya Pradesh Police, but also with New York University, Marin Institute at New York University. The objective of the study was to gauge the satisfaction of new recruits with the training program at the academy, understand their expectations on how the training program can be improved, and identify the factors that motivate new recruits. There were many positives and negatives, but it's heartening to see that some of the areas of improvement which were identified through the survey, such as regular evaluation of the faculty, improving the quality of indoor training, improving the infrastructure have been actually addressed in a very incremental way. These have become the priority area at the academy, and the leadership has been really motivated and devoted towards addressing them. So this is definitely a success of evidence-informed policing. The second one, which is a more recent one, where actually the community policing aspect is very core to it, is an internal communication, motivation, and agency survey that we did with constables. So at the peak of COVID in last summer, when the entire population was actually vulnerable and the government was also vulnerable, the state, everyone was in a state of shock. Actually, constables were at the forefront. They were actually the largest portion of the frontline state, delivering and ameliorating the issues that people were facing. Vulnerability was really across the population, and everyone was in stress. At that time, actually, the ambit of duties became much larger than the traditional policing duty. It was beyond quarantine, beyond the regular crime investigation role. It was more about the guardian role, as we call it. They had to actually ensure quarantine orders, address distress calls, help with contact tracing, distribute essential supplies. It was just an array of responsibilities. So we covered about 773 constables across Madhya Pradesh, across almost all the districts in Madhya Pradesh. And we found that intrinsic motivation, camaraderie, clear communication, and positive appraisals are enablers for delivering public services during the pandemic. This was a study which was limited. It has its limitations given the fact that we could not go on ground, but it did give a glimpse of what is within the organization that actually enables people on the ground to actually perform. It also kind of throws up very important and interesting aspects around motivation, around appraisal, around camaraderie, which can be actually built upon over the years. It can be actually weaved into the organizational system and help the organization to perform in a brilliant way. So I just wanted to give a glimpse of what we have been trying to do, and I'm really happy that these studies and these evidence ways of looking at very complicated public policy issues, not just with us but with a wide range of individuals and experts and organization, has led to establishment of the lab at the Madhya Pradesh Police Academy. I hope it leads to building up of an ecosystem which will enable evidence-informed policy making as well as implementation, and also set up a great example for other states as well as internationally. Thank you, and I'm sorry if I've taken a little more time.
It was wonderful to hear from you regarding the three studies you have mentioned, and all three are referring to the interface of security, justice, and the community, and allow us to go deeper into the context of state capacity and where all the state capacity needs to be worked out. Uh, Based on this, we can have some observations, but before I go on that, we'll request Professor Peter Oakes to share his context of seeing the community and its interface with the conflict within the community, and how the conflicts within the communities based on religious or cultural ideas affect the security and its outcomes. I'll now invite Professor Oakes for his views. After we have heard Professor Oakes, then we'll open the house for discussion. Professor Oakes, can we have your time with us? Can
Yes,
we
thank you.
discuss this thing? Yeah.
Thank you so much. Am I being heard?
Yes, sir. You're clear.
Okay. Well, thank you, Vineet. It's an honor to be invited to what I consider an urgently important gathering. And I love the previous presentation, and you'll hear why after I speak. It was also a privilege to spend a year as Vineet Kapoor's colleague here at the University of Virginia. I soon discovered that his police work in Madhya Pradesh would serve as a perfect case study for my own work on religion, politics, and conflict. It was the first time I had heard a police officer's account of India's history of both cooperation and conflict among religious and ethnic groups, an account that made historical sense to me, and that was also tied to a sophisticated on-the-ground practice of peace building in the context of community policing. This evening, or for me this morning, I'd like to address just one small question within the broader discussion of state capacities. It is this: if the state wants to care for the needs and concerns of minority groups, how will it identify those needs and concerns? We've already heard some of this, some answer from the previous speaker. I assume that this is not a difficult question when the needs are publicly visible, even if it takes some sophistication to see them. For example, poverty, disease, environmental disaster. But what about needs that are not publicly visible because they are matters of the heart or of ethnic or religious tradition? I am thinking, for example, of a group's sense of identity or self-respect, or of a group's expectations about acceptable speech or care for the weak, or about what a group considers absolutely sacred and inviolable. Some of these are needs that state institutions and officials are not accustomed or trained to notice. Others are needs that are made visible only within religious vocabularies, symbols, and the body language of the minority group. If the state seeks to address such needs, it must learn how to listen to what a group is saying. Now, I'm most eager to hear all of your thoughts about how state institutions can listen. Because group needs are expressed in many ways, I believe the state and the police must nurture many different ways of listening. I shall illustrate just two of these ways, and if I could, Vineet, I'd like to share screen for this. I'm simply sharing my text so we can read me together, okay? I thought it might be clearer to you that way. Let's see. I don't know if I have the right one. Yes. Okay. Did you all see that?
Yes, we can see now.
Okay.
We can see
The
now.
first, good.
Yes.
The first example is community policing. And the example is Vineet's own account of the infrastructure of community policing when he was superintendent of police in the city of Vidisha. This comes from a paper a few of us are working on. Vidisha's community policing inherited a century of memories of interreligious conflict, but also 50 years of national guidelines about how to coordinate cooperative engagement among national, state, and city institutions of civic and policing. And between all of these and an interconnected array of city-specific communal organizations, including religious and ethnic groups, labor unions, civic groups, professional groups, and most important, a citizens police committee and a police-run citizens safety committee. You have all heard, I'm sure, about the phenomena of militarized and racist tendencies in some American police forces today. You've heard this in connection with the Black Lives Matters protest. I do not believe that the US government, both national, state, and local, has the capacities to solve this problem, because there is no history comparable to that of India's interinstitutional responses to interethnic and interreligious conflict. If there were a solution for the USA. I believe it would come through instruction from India, and in particular, I should say, from Madhya Pradesh, about how to institute national and local guidelines like those I have just mentioned. Following India and Madhya Pradesh, American civic and police institutions would have to attend to the following guidelines. And I think it would actually take 3 decades of work to do this in the US. History. Attend to the local, cultural, and historical factors affecting inter-community conflicts. Infrastructure. Achieve detailed familiarity with the institutional arrangements mandated by governmental law and local custom. Localization. Attend carefully to local histories and to all networks of relations pertinent to the conflict. Achieve detailed familiarity with each ethnic and religious group. This is the most difficult, I think. And I think it may be achieved in Vidisha. It's matters of the heart, of memory, and of belief. Geography and spatial correlation. Achieve detailed familiarity with the urban space of different communities, including sites of claims and counterclaims and zones of transitions, passages and corridors that may be prone to conflict. Actors affecting community sentiment and local politics. Be aware of local actors and networks that affect community sentiments and politics. Address them, attend. Finally, flexible and non-coercive strategies of mitigation. By the way, this is one of the most challenging aspects in the US right now, along with attention in general to community policing. Adjust best policing strategies to meet real-time conditions. Resort to coercive measures only as a last resort. My second brief example comes from my own 30 years of work, initially with 2 colleagues in Cambridge and 1 in Pakistan. 30 years of work I've done with others nurturing cooperative dialogues among members of traditionally religious groups that are not prone to liking or trusting each other's beliefs and traditions. After co-facilitating over 4,000 sessions of this kind of dialogue in the US, Europe, Africa, Middle East, and China, I have learned the following surprising lessons, surprising for me, probably not for you, and best practices. First, this is the most surprising to most of my colleagues when I was working at the State Department as an academic consultant. They just didn't expect this. They had a secularist notion that religious difference is a cause of conflict. And I said, not so fast. Individuals who display strong and pure religious conviction admire that kind of conviction in individuals from other traditions. At first, the obvious difference between traditions seems threatening to these individuals. But we have found proven ways of attracting dialogue participants to release their fears of each other and discover under them something they deeply admire. Such admiration does not arise, however, no matter how long we've worked, when individuals sense something missing in the other's convictions, that is, something about the other's religious conviction, not because it's different, but something in its character makes individuals frightened. We have developed, and I began this in about 11 years ago at the State Department, but have worked on it since with colleagues at UVA and many other places, including with my colleague Vineet. We have developed quantitative ethno-linguistic diagnostic tools that enable us to anticipate which groups will be admired by the others and which not. We classify the potentially admirable groups. Again, I'm not saying admirable, I'm saying admirable by the other groups over time. Which groups could be engaged? We classify the potentially admirable groups as displaying what we call, just as a name, linguistic flexibility, by which we mean a capacity to interpret sacred beliefs in multiple ways. We classify potentially non-admirable groups as displaying what we call linguistic inflexibility. I just acquired a a something ability on, and I can't. Something just happened. I got a chat message to say yes, and I did, but I shouldn't have because now I can't scroll. Any help from the from our bosses? No.
What kind of help?
Oh, it was an annotation request from Karen Miney,
Okay.
and that ability took away my ability to scroll. So, is there any way to for me to regain control?
Maybe you can stop and try sharing again. Maybe you can stop
Can you
sharing.
repeat
Yeah,
it,
I
Neha?
can't. I can't do that because
Can
my
you
pen.
stop sharing?
I'm unable to stop sharing because my pointer has become an ink pen. So let me see. Oh dear.
Uh,
Well, if needed, I'll just read without showing, but any hope here?
uh,
You see the tool right here? I've gained this wonderful tool. But, okay, I'm not going to take your time. Oh, here we go. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, everybody. Let me try this again. Okay, here I go. We classify potentially non-admirable groups as displaying linguistic inflexibility. These tools enable us to really get enough data that we know in detail for each case is different. These tools enable us to nurture trust among group members over the course of biweekly meetings. It usually takes several months of such meetings before the trust warms up and deep mutual learning and constructive debate takes place. Our approach would be fully applicable to settings of police work in the US or in Vidisha. And I want to close with a different text that'll display some, it'll just take me 1 minute. This one displays some of our data diagrams. Here you go. For example, do you see these now, everybody? Yep. These are,
I think
I'm sorry, do you see it?
no, till now we have not been able to see, but I think
I-
it will display. It will display. Yeah.
Okay, if it doesn't display, I will. I don't hear you, Vineet. You say it's not displaying?
No, it's not displaying. We can just see a black screen.
Okay, in that case, I will. Okay, in that case, I'll close by just.
Yeah, you can just speak. You can just speak. Just close.
Yeah, I'll just speak
So
now.
it's visible now, sir. It's
It's
visible now.
visible now. It's visible now.
Okay, so just a 1 minute conclusion. These are examples from my writings of some of the results we obtained. In this case, studies in a traditional Pakistani seminary, studies of group members over 14 weeks. What we found, you'll see those peaks and valleys hover around the number 5. And 5, as you'll see in this collection of a number of different groups we've compared, we found ranges of linguistic flexibility between what we call 0 and 9 as extremes. And we found surprisingly the most flexible groups were not particularly adept were not particularly admirable. The least were the most inadmirable to other groups. The most admirable were in the middle, groups that had a balance of enough inflexibility that they could clearly define a range of meanings that they are attached to, but a range of meanings, as opposed to the extremely flexible, which groups tended to reduce their arguments to the arguments of all of their different members. There was no coherence. And by predicting and anticipating a group's linguistic tendencies, we were able to plan for each dialogue how best that group would engage other groups. When the groups were utterly inflexible, they couldn't engage. But over the years, most of our groups had ranges of admirability, which means if applied to a setting as in Madhya Pradesh, we might, through this quantitative approach, reproduce somewhat of what I've come to recognize in Vineet Kapoor's intuitive sense of group behavior in Vidisha. Thank you. Okay. All done? Do you all hear me? I was saying goodbye. I don't hear our moderator.
Yes, Peter, we can hear you. I think the academy has lost connectivity. Just hold on.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he's back home.
Okay. So thank you all. Sorry for the sharing challenge.
Neha, if you have host capabilities, if Anita and team aren't able to join, maybe you can moderate some questions while we wait.
I mean, it's a meeting, but yeah, Ms. Rao, is it okay to continue the conversation?
So I think so. Let's continue. Let's take a few
Okay.
questions. Anybody who want to ask them?
Yeah, sure. Sure. I'm happy to moderate while Vineet is away. Maybe whoever would like to share their comments about it. Today's been some tech challenges, but it should be back very soon. Angela, would you like to share any comments about it? Basically, over the last 5 days.
Sure, I'd be happy to, and hopefully others are able to join soon. Thank you, everybody. Thank you both. Those are wonderful, wonderful presentations. I was actually especially
I think Miss Rashmi Pandey's phone is echoing. If we could kindly have that on mute. Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. It was really heartening for me to hear the active role that Indian policing has had in their guardian role in responding to COVID. As we think about community policing relationships, the sorts of guardian functions can make a big difference in establishing rapport with the community. Thank you, Peter, too, for a great presentation and wonderful comments. A couple of things when we talk about community policing, I often think about the potential two-way potential of that. There's community policing where police are in the community, but also community policing as a vehicle for allowing the community to police by making sure that their input is.
Can you hear me? No.
Vineet, are you there?
Seems like there's been an outage.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. Can you hear me? I'm so sorry. We had a thunderstorm here, and so because of uh, everything got disrupted. So now I could join again. So I'm very sorry for the disruption. So Neha was continuing the discussion, I think. Please carry on, Neha, so I'll have a context. Yeah.
Angela was sharing her comments about community policing and the guardian role of police during COVID. But then it was echoing a lot, so I couldn't hear it well.
Uh, yeah. So I think Angela was speaking earlier, and after that, I don't have a clue who was speaking. But we have a lot of lot of eminent people joining who have a lot of interface with the security, justice, and state capacity. Mr. Amit Reddy, who's associated with IDFC Institute and is a very important participant in the discussion series. I would ask him to comment on today's discussion and any comments he has, particularly in context of the conflict and state capacity, what Professor Oakes was mentioning. Ready, sir?
Can you hear me, Vineet?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Vineet, for inviting me to share my a very auspicious occasion Indian police that we have on the path of what I is My connection is just gone out. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Is the connection okay? Am I audible?
Yes, sir. You are audible and clear, sir.
Okay. So I would like to thank the entire police force of Madhya Pradesh, Aruna, as well as Anuradha, as well as the DG and IGP of the state for having supported the IDFC Institute. Having said that, I would like to say that today's theme spans across the middle, both in the form of a pure individual as well as someone belonging to a community, particularly as, let's say, a minority. I think Neha's presentation was more about slice of the population in terms of their interaction with police, whether it is a study or whether it is about vulnerability. And the other presentation was more about reality in the form of a community. I think both are very relevant in the modern context, even in India. We need not dilate a lot on it, but what I would like to say is that I think what come out of the presentation that prevention-focused policing is what seems to be the not just requirement of policing, but also a necessity, because I think prevention has been largely given a go by for most of the crime across the country, and I can say that with my experience in Karnataka state, that I think largely in India also prevention has been given a go by. So I think prevention focused policing and citizen centric or a victim centric policing within the overall continuum that Neha spoke about, which is what will keep the let's say a continuous operation of the courts around the three entities that you have mentioned: the community, the security, as well as justice. All these three interacting with each other and resulting in a kind of a sense of security type of an environment for a normal citizen. So as to reduce the vulnerability. I think it's a wonderful theme and very well articulated both by Neha as well as Peter. And I really look forward that Madhya Pradesh continues this trailblazer role of research and evidence-based policing.
Sir. Thank you, sir. And I would also now invite Vikas Narayan Rai, sir, VN Rai, sir, who's a eminent police officer, a commentator on law enforcement and justice. And he has been evaluating police in India and abroad. And he's he has been contributing to newspaper articles after his retirement. He's been also a trainer of great significance. Sir, Vikas VN Rai, sir, I would invite you now, sir, for your comments on today's discussion and the theme of today's roundtable, sir. I think there is some. Yeah, yes, sir.
Able to make any comment today. Thank you very much.
Okay, sir.
But I enjoyed listening.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. And if there are any comments from, I think Angela has already made certain comments. Neha? Angela has already made some comments. I think I was
She
away
was.
at that time.
Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
there was a lot of echo around that time. So
Okay.
even
Okay.
I couldn't hear very well. If Angela is, Angela, are you still there?
I am still here, yes. I'm not sure if anybody heard me. I just want to make sure there's room for others. I know you have an esteemed collection of people, so I don't want to occupy all the airtime. But if there's space, I'll happy to make a few comments if there's room. So my comment that people might not have heard was just the idea of community policing is really a two-way opportunity. The idea of integrating law enforcement in the community, but also giving community a way to police the police. That two-way communication channel. And then the only other point I wanted to make is when you think about in Peter's presentation, he talked about the idea that there are actors that have community influence, right? And we have to think about those local actors, but we also need to think about the outside actors that are having similar influence, increasingly with online platforms that are obviously also shaping the relationship between players. So it's important for police departments to keep an eye on those. Thank you all. It was a great session. I'll mute myself now.
Thank you. Thank you. Angela, this aspect of community policing and its connect with the state capacity itself is a huge area of deliberation for the police forces and for the governments. Because what I see is that community policing is seen as an adjunct to whatever police is doing, but it is not seen from the context of increasing the state capacity or addressing the state capacity through democratic policing norms. And the normative standards of community policing are not institutionalized. We in Madhya Pradesh have an act, a law, which in 1989 established community policing as a legal binding for every police force, every police district to establish Nagar Raksha Samiti and Gram Raksha Samiti in each district. And this normative standard was transformed into a legal binding through that act. That kind of institute, what Peter wanted to say was that the community policing system is ingrained into the working. So that kind of internalization of community policing can come through institutionalization effort, which can be supplemented through law, and the state capacity would increase that way. But if it is done just cosmetically to address some issues of police-public relationship, then it's not addressing the state capacity the way it should be doing. So that's my take on what Angela wanted to highlight. Any other comments from our participants on this particular issue or on the issue of the accessibility itself and the interface with the community? Satya, would you like to say something?
I will definitely, sir. And thank you, sir, for again hosting such a critical issue, which actually fits into the overall frame of the Jiva and the PARIMAL Center. I have a comment and a question. My comment that even while working with the law enforcement as well as with the community, I'm very glad that the study highlights about the criticality of the prevention aspect, which somewhere holds a very important aspect while dealing with the criminal justice system. Uh, my comment would be that one of the major focus while looking at the community policing, and I'm glad, Vineet sir, that you also highlighted that every time we look everything for the police, and we expect that the police is the single window which will connect and which will offer all these services. But we know when we look from the victim-centric aspect, we know that it's just not the police who will be delivering all the services. but maybe they are the one who can connect to the other service providers, which is also required by the police, by the victims. So I think in that aspect it is critical the way I look at it, because even Vinay sir, if you can mute yourself, I think Vinith sir, if you can mute yourself, I think there are a lot of noise coming in. Sorry, sir. Yeah, thank you. So my point that looking at the training aspect, the way we do it, with the way we do with the constabulary, we know that they are the first responders at the ground. And when we reach out to them and ask that, your role in prevention, plays a critical, dimension. But just limiting to that aspect has never been turned out to be very fruitful. Asking them that connecting to the other service provider, because if you go to any new district, it's the only police who will be available 24/7. You won't know where is the district magistrate office or the other administrative offices, and it's the police who can bridge and connect to the other service provider. So when I'm looking at a victim at the center, and then I am placing community policing, what is critical that we should not limit ourselves to the role of the police itself, and that to a very limited aspect of sensitizing and telling them that how police and the community interface is important, but taking it next to the next level where we also connect to the other service provider, because it's the police who will be the first responders. So that's going to be my one comment. Now coming back to the IDFC presentation, it's very important, and I was very interested that you talked about the four major metro cities and the kind of satisfaction level, and also somewhere you brought in the gender aspect to it. I may have missed out some of the part because of my network connectivity, but could you tell us some of the recommendations, in very brief, and what was the sample size and when it was done? Because at the Jiva, at the Parimal Center, that's just been one of the effort, and Vinit ji and Aruna ma'am and Anuradha's ma'am guidance, we want to take up some of the learnings and bring into context to Madhya Pradesh through the Gender Resource Center and other initiative. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, Vineet, I'll just address the question that Satya has posed. So, Satya, we did this study in 2016-17. We covered 20,000 plus households. So it was a big survey. It was a big sample with a very low margin of error, and like all the statistics taken care of so that we can make the population level estimation. Uh, the idea behind doing this was actually to illustrate that we need to do something like this because India doesn't have a crime victimization survey. We completely rely on understanding the rule of law space through the official crime records, which is very limited. And given our resources, we could just do it in 4 cities. But the idea was to actually illustrate what can happen if we do something like this at an all India level but going micro at district and the police zone level. So, in fact, I like to just mention that within BP R&D, they are actually anchoring and launching an all India survey. It should have been over by now, but for COVID. Uh, it was supposed to go on ground early last year, but it actually couldn't, and it will be a huge sample of over 1 lakh households across the country. So again, statistically robust, etc. Quite a fantastic effort going on around that. And in terms of recommendations, the first and foremost recommendation is that we need to collect data to be able to complement the official records, to understand, to have a better and more holistic understanding of rule of law in the country, in the different micro. Sorry, there's again an echo, but I hope you guys can hear me. So that's definitely the first recommendation. In fact, we met Vineet at one of the presentations when we were doing at National Police Academy of this very thing back in 2017, I think. and it's been a journey since working with MP. In terms of the other recommendations, which are really important, is because the survey actually talked about this, asked about the satisfaction and the dissatisfaction levels. It also asked about the different reasons, the different reasons behind certain experiences of people. So those can be actually weaved into the training program. Soft skills really came up as a very important aspect for making people feel comfortable to actually reach out to the police. In fact, when we were presenting this data, we presented it in all the commissionerates and in different central and state level bodies. Some of the commissionerates actually mentioned that they would like to work on the soft skills aspect because it really makes a remarkable difference in terms of accessibility when victims approach. And it of course, like people hear from others, and communication is a really important part. So many aspects around it. Accessibility was a very key aspect, and accessibility really informs security in the society. So a couple of them, in fact, I can share the report with you, which I had. I can get your email ID and I can share that with you. It's a very crisp report and has all
Thank
the
you.
results.
Thank you, Neha.
Thank you. Thank you. Neha. Thank you for illustrating this with so many examples. Now we are coming to the close of this discussion. I'm very sorry we had a lot of disruptions because of untoward circumstances. I would like at this time to thank our Special DG Training, Madam Aruna Mohan Rao, for initiating this round table itself and for giving this idea. I would also thank Anuradha Shankar ma'am for her wonderful suggestions and valuable guidance in this effort. I would now request Aruna Mohan Rao ma'am to give her closing address for this 5 days Jiva theme roundtables and on today's discussion. Ma'am, please.
Thank you, Vineet. Definitely, we are having a different kind of weather. When we're expecting it to be hot, we are having rains. So, a very warm welcome to all of you on this forum. I think these 5 days have been very enriching for all of us, including me. And the quality of the discussions have been absolutely top notch, and everybody participated wholeheartedly. I think this whole exercise has been a very good example of discussing and then bringing out some good things which can be put into practice. Till now, the training branch, I think, has only concentrated on providing training, basic training to our constables, DSPs, and sub-inspectors. And this is the first attempt that MP Police has done to. Vineet, can you mute yourself? Vineet, can you mute yourself? Yeah, thank you. Oh, a lot of noise coming from there. So, I think this is the first time that we have really got totally involved in discussing issues and doing a lot of research, getting people who do research onto onto our platform, and this has given us a lot of insights into what has to be done actually in practice. So I find that till now there is a wide gap between what we are preaching and what we are practicing on the field, and that unless we lessen that gap, the policing will not be very successful, according to me. And I think that these kind of discussions need to be conceptualized and taken to the field, like like the experiment in Vidisha. This is one very good example of how we brought our thoughts or convictions or whatever discussions happened into practice. And one-stop crisis center for women, I think, is the way forward for all of us. But the 5 days, the discussions were extremely useful in the sense that I think we touched on very, very important topics. We started off with anti-human trafficking, again a very, very serious issue, which is I think all over the world, and we need to address it in a very concise and very well thought out strategic way. Then we had the Urja help desk. The next day we talked about that, and the one-stop crisis centers. The Urja help desk is now is going to take off in the sense that the central government has also sanctioned for this kind of help desk. But then again, how we implement it is going to be very, very important. So these kind of thoughts that have come out of our discussions, we will have to bring it into the implementation platform as well. Then we talked about law enforcement in the protection of women, children, minorities, and the poor. They say in India we have the best kind of laws, but the implementation of the laws is always a little dicey, because there are people who always find shortcuts to circumvent the law. So how to bring justice to these vulnerable groups? This was discussed, I think, very beautifully by very eminent speakers yesterday. And again, because police is a state subject, so there are different ways how governments deal with these issues, and the satisfaction level also will be different in different states. But efforts definitely are on, and I think these kind of brainstorming will always bring out good results, and hopefully as we go forward we'll be able to bring these all these thoughts into actual practice. And today, of course, a very good insights from Neha and Peter. Again, there is the government institutions are always there to address people's complaints and people's issues on a wider scale. But how exactly they do it, again, is it differs from state to state. But it is a major, it's actually the major duty of the governments to bring some kind of satisfaction to people who have who are facing issues, who are facing crime, who are facing any other kind of problems. So I would like to register my heartfelt thanks to all of you for being with us all these 5 days, and bringing out such beautiful thoughts for us to ruminate on and take it forward. And because these 5 days have been so successful and everybody has participated with so much of enthusiasm, if the House agrees, I think we can make this an annual event, and continue to do this brainstorming on various burning issues every year. So if the House agrees, then we'll make this an annual event. And I would again like to thank all of you for being part of this very good initiative. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. And we are encouraged by your comments, and definitely, I think this is a good idea to take it forward as an annual event. I'm thankful on behalf of the PARIMAL, the Pracademic Lab, to all the participants who have been attending it. Since all 5 days they have been a part of it, and we could hear a wonderful set of ideas every day. Thank you, Peter, for joining us and taking out time so early in the morning for us. And thank you, Neha, for your wonderful presentation today. Thanks, Madam Aruna Mohan Rao, for her valuable comments, her encouragement, which are always full of strength for us, and also for and also to thanks to Anuradha ma'am for her guidance, and to all my colleagues who have been supporting this effort. So thank you. I'll particularly thank Ava ma'am. She has been a regular attendee for all these 5 days. And thank you so much, ma'am, for being there. To Atul Shahji has been really very actively participating. And after every session, he gives some comments on my mobile that he learned a lot on this. So thank you so much, everyone. Thanks very much, and we'll meet again. I hope. I think now we'll leave the meeting, and
Thank you, sir.
I hope we always remain in touch.
Thank you, sir.
Uh,
Thank
we
you.
we are we are keeping the WhatsApp group on. So any comments, you can always put it there on the WhatsApp group. So thank you so much.
I would like to
Thank you.
congratulate
Thank you.
my whole team, ADG Anuradha and Vineet and his whole team for this excellent effort.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your encouragement.